A dyno is a machine which allows you to measure the horsepower of a car. There are two kinds of dynos. There is an engine dyno and there's a chassis dyno. The engine dyno is very accurate for measuring the horsepower of an engine, but the tough part of it is you have to take the engine out of the car, which for us that's not very convenient, so we use a chassis dyno, which allows you to measure the horsepower of the entire car from the wheels. In this case, the dyno uses a weighted roller, which has a known mass, and the car spins that roller, and the speed at which the roller spins up determines how much power the car is making. Horsepower can be measured in several different ways. When you read about a new car, this car came with 271 horsepower. That measurement is at the engine, using an engine dyno. When you have horsepower at the wheels, that number will be lower because you lose some power through the drivetrain and the wheels. So this car at the wheels, when it was new, might make 225 horsepower. Cost of a dyno would probably be about $50,000 to $60,000 for the most basic model. This is a DynoJet dyno, which is the brand of the dyno. It's an all-wheel drive model, meaning you can have two-wheel drive cars on it or all-wheel drive cars. It has two large, massive rollers. Each one is the equivalent of a 2,500-pound car. And the dyno can handle 1,000 horsepower at either roller, or both, and can go up to 180 miles per hour. And there's some extra hardware to move the rollers apart to match the wheelbase of the car, and that would probably run you about $80,000 plus installation. So it's a significant investment. The dyno is controlled by a computer. What you'll see on the computer is the wheel speed and the engine speed, and the air-fuel rating is listed across the bottom of the screen. It's sort of a dashboard to look at from in the car. The reason that you would use a dyno rather than just driving the car up and down the street, there's a couple reasons for that. One is the accuracy. It's very repeatable, it's stable, the temperature in here stays the same. It's a very scientific way to measure horsepower. The other thing is that there's a big safety factor. In trying to drive the car at full speed on the road, you risk breaking the law, as well as it can be quite dangerous to try to zoom around at 100 miles an hour on a public road. We can use it to figure out if the change that we make, we put on a new intake system or a new exhaust system or change the turbo boost, we can see before and after whether that change made a difference. And again, that sort of scientific accuracy of it, we can tell to within a very small amount whether it's made a difference. We can read a difference of 2 horsepower out of 200 or 300, and on the street that would be almost impossible to figure out. Definition of the word horsepower. James Watt came up with this word. Watt is the person who the electrical unit is named after, and James Watt was selling steam engines, and he wanted to be able to say how much power was the steam engine making in terms of horses. And that definition turned out to be that one horse can lift 33,000 pounds 1 foot in 1 minute, or 33,000 foot-pounds per minute. So that's a horsepower. And now you know.
Hi, I'm Rob Hamilton with S&H Racecraft. We build race cars. We've been in business for over 10 years with a combined experience of over 50 years. We specialize in custom fabrication, roll cages, roll bars, narrow rear end housings, front halves, rear halves. That's where you modify the front of the car or the back of the car for drag racing purposes. Well, it's mandatory by NHRA and IHRA specifications to have a roll cage if your car exceeds 1199 in ET in a quarter mile. It's basically a safety thing. So, you know, that if the car would roll or crash into the wall or something like that, you wouldn't get hurt. Well, you're less likely to get hurt. So. The Box Nova that we have in the shop it just has a roll bar in it. It doesn't have a roll cage. The car doesn't run fast enough to need a roll cage. It runs in the tens, and it only has the main hoop, which goes around pretty much over the back of the driver, and it has two down bars, which support the main hoop from being able to rock, and it has two front bars, which do the same thing. The average cost for a 6-point roll cage, it varies in price because you have two materials that they're made out of, one being chrome moly and one being mild steel. The mild steel roll cages start at around $1,000, can go as high as $1,500, depending on how much of the interior is still in the car. The chrome moly roll cage is a much higher cost in materials, and that roll cage can vary from $1,500 to $2,200. Roll cages can be ordered to fit individual vehicles. However, they're not always an exact fit. The best way to get the best fit out of a roll cage is to custom fabricate it yourself and bend it using templates. Okay, the first thing you do when installing roll cages is to remove the interior. Removing all the interior, covering up all the glass with a plastic or a protective weld coating so that weld splatter doesn't hit the glass and burn the glass. Also, the battery should be disconnected to keep the computer from getting spiked from the welding process. The chroming process on a roll cage is frowned upon by NHRA and IHRA because of the process used, which is the material has to be highly polished before it's then copper plated to be chrome plated. And when you polish it, you're taking material off the bar, which makes the bar thinner. Well, NHRA and IHRA want to be able to check the thickness of the bar. And with the chrome plating on there, it's hard for them to do that because they get a false reading. The roll cage generally adds about 200 to 250 pounds to the car. It depends on how many bars are added to the car. You know, a roll bar is only 6 points, so therefore it's a lot less material in the car, so it's a lot lighter. The full cage, which you need to run in the 9-second range, that has got many more bars, so much more weight, so generally 250 pounds, 300 pounds. A roll bar generally takes about 3 days to install. If the customer has the interior out, that makes it much easier for us. If we have to take the interior out, it can take as much as 5 days. A roll cage generally takes us a week and a half to do. And same with the interior. If the customer has it out, it's easier. If he leaves it in, it adds about a day and a half, 2 days on to the job.
I've been in business to the public for possibly 6 years, but before that, I worked out of my mom's garage since I'd say about 1981, porting and polishing, suspension setup, race bikes, street bikes, ATVs, watercraft, dirt bikes, anything that the customer requests. GP has set records with the public and also with road racers and drag racers in the Washington, D.C. area in regards to tuning and modifying any part of a motorcycle you can think of. I prefer the motorcycle versus the car. Just think of being a caged animal or an animal running in the free. You know, with a motorcycle, you don't have all the metal surrounding you. A car, you're so confined to a little box. But with the motorcycle, you have all the elements pounding away at you, and and it just feels more natural to be on a motorcycle versus a car. I prefer racing on the track legally, but what I advise riders is to make sure that the time is right. If you're going to twist that throttle any more than you need to, then make sure that the conditions are right. Basically, because you have 2 wheels versus 4 wheels, that you have to really understand that there's no room for mistakes. When it comes to motorcycling, you're going to crash. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to say that I want you to, but you learn from crashing. It's a good experience, as long as you can walk away from it. So one advantage of racing a motorcycle versus a car would be the ability to store the parts. I mean, a car takes up so much space versus the motorcycle parts. Storing the motorcycle, you can throw it in your bedroom if you want to, and work on it in your kitchen if you want to. When purchasing a motorcycle, you want to stay with a stock bike as much as possible versus a modified. Depending upon when you purchase a modified bike, you want to stay with the least modified, such as maybe they put a full exhaust, a jack kit, a set of tires, and that's about as far as you want to go. What I recommend is doing research as much as possible on that particular model. Mileage, you want to stay with low mileage. And if you possibly could, bring the motorcycle to a qualified shop they can take a quick look over, and then they can give you some advice on whether it's worth purchasing or not. Yeah, for instance, this particular bike is 1989. The bodywork you can acquire from an aftermarket company, the whole complete set for about $600 to $1,000. And with a little modification, you have many choices of body styles to put on this bike. Like this particular model. If you wanted a show bike, you'll probably spend $1,000 or more. Or you can just slap on a paint job for $200 or $300 and ride it as is. The average cost of a new motorcycle is approximately $6,000 to $7,000. A used motorcycle of the same version, a 600cc, can cost you about $3,000 to $4,000. I prefer to purchase a used one, especially if you're a new rider. That way you can get used to the bike, and if you crash it, it won't be a big deal. You can get up and shake the dust off of it and be on your way. And then after you get used to the used motorcycle, dropping it 20 million times, then I would suggest getting a new motorcycle and go that route. The fastest I've gone on a bike, the speedo read 220. I had it at 220 for about 5 seconds. But after 110 miles an hour, it all seems the same to me.